Welcome to episode 2 on Wrenches to Adventures. My name is Bryce, and today we're going to be addressing a number of suspension issues that I've had for quite a while now. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hope you enjoy. Alright, so it's a new day. Now that the front bumper's done, we're going to go ahead and get some suspension upgrades that are much needed installed. I'm going to go ahead and show you what we're doing and the cool things that I have in store. So one of the main upgrades that we're going to be doing to the suspension is we're going to be upgrading the shocks. So the shocks that are currently installed are from the Rusty's Off-Road 4.5-inch long arm kit. They're nitrogen filled shock and they've been great. They've been all right, but I've always wanted to upgrade and get something with a little better performance. So the shocks that I decided to go with are these Fox 2.0s. The reason is because for one, there's better performance out of these shocks. Also, they're definitely budget friendly. They're not too expensive and they're reliable, great quality. They should be plenty good for what I'm going to use my Jeep for. I'll go ahead and I'll put the part number down in the description and on the screen. So if you're interested in knowing exactly what shocks these are, that'll all be available for you. So we're going to first install the front shocks, just typical install on shocks on a Jeep Cherokee. The rear will be a little bit different and I'll go over that when we get to that point. But let's get started. So something that I failed to mention about the front shocks is my shock setup is a little bit different from the factory. As you can see here, I'm currently messing with this upper shock mount. So this is the Rusty's upper shock conversion. It gets rid of the stem that's on your traditional Jeep shock and replaces it. So you can install a traditional hourglass shaped shock. It's pretty nice. So my shocks are actually the same front and rear. On a stock application, that won't be the case. So the upper shock conversion runs about $49. I'll put the link down in the description. So if you're interested in having a similar setup as mine, that's where you'll be able to find it. Alright, so it's the next day. We're going to get started on the rear shocks. There's also a handful of maintenance things that I need to get done. So I'm going to go over everything that's going to happen. Should be pretty cool. Let's get into it. So the rear axle that I have installed in my Jeep XJ is a Dana 44 out of a 1987 Jeep XJ. I got really lucky and found this axle locally. So when I swapped it in, there were several things that I didn't take into account during the swap that we're going to address today. First of all, the axle vent is a plastic barb and it's constantly leaking. The second thing is when I installed the lift kit, I also installed 7-degree shims, which changed the angle of the shock mounts. And I had to flip the shocks upside down in order to get them to fit, which caused the driver's rear shock to blow out, leak all the fluid out. I also didn't know that the rear bump stops don't touch anything when the rear is flexing. We're also going to address that. And then when I painted it, I didn't do the best prep job, so we're going to fix all the paint and make it look nice again. All right, so here are the parts that I have for the rear suspension. First off, we got our Fox 2.0 shocks. And to go with the new shocks, I have new rear lower shock mounts from Stinky Fab Racing. These are their low profile shocks that still allow you to run a standard length shock. Second, we have the original brass barb from the Dana 35C. We're going to drill and tap and install that. And then thirdly, for the bump stops in the rear from Dirtbound Off-Road, I bought their rear leaf spring plates with the bump stop provisions. This will just give the bump stops a place to land when the rear is flexing. All these things will definitely make the rear much better and get it a little more dialed in. So I'll go ahead and put all the links down in the description. That way you can pick some of these parts up yourself. So let's go ahead and get the time lapse set up and we'll get to work. All right, so this is what I got going on. So I got the axle out of the Jeep. I removed the driver's side axle shaft and I got the axle vent all finished up. So what I ended up doing is I just drilled the existing hole out bigger and tapped it to put the brass barb from the Dana 35C in there. And then I welded up the old hole from the old axle vent from that plastic barb that was in there. So I got that all welded up and then I got everything painted. It's all looking great. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the axle shaft put back in and then we'll flip the axle over and begin cutting off the shock mounts so we can get the new stuff all mocked up. right, so I've done a lot of work off camera. So the point that I'm at now is I got the old shock mounts all removed. I ground everything down and I reinstalled the rear axle. Now that I have got the rear axle reinstalled, I tacked on the new lower shock mounts. They turned out really great. They're perfectly level and symmetrical from left to right. Everything lines up perfectly with the upper shock mounts as well. So the next step is to pull the axle back out, burn everything in fully, and get everything prepped for paint. But I'm really satisfied with how this is all turning out. Got some more ground clearance over the stock mounts, and yeah, it's looking great. All right, so last night I got the rear axle fully removed after I mocked up the shock mounts and got all that stuff situated. Now that the axle's removed, we're gonna start working on getting everything finish welded. But in order to do that, I wanna remove the brakes because we're gonna be painting afterwards, and I just wanna get everything prepped for that as well. So we're gonna get right into it, start welding and removing the brakes. All right, well here it is. It's been a couple hours. The welds have all cooled down, but looks great. The welds look great. Definitely gonna be strong. Couldn't be more happy with how this all turned out. Can't wait to get it installed and get the shocks on there. So what we're gonna do next is we're gonna get everything all sanded down and prepped for paint. We'll get it all painted and looking nice again, and then we'll get it all installed. All right, so this is where I'm at. This is taking way longer than I'm willing to admit, but when you work a full-time job, it is what it is. You only get to work on stuff when you have time, when you're not tired. So I wanna show you where I'm at, and we'll get this axle put back in. All right, so I finally got the axle all painted, fully assembled, everything's back on it. Brake lines, brakes, it's looking really good. I'm excited to get it back onto the Jeep and start driving it again. So next up is to get this axle put back under the Jeep, get everything all buttoned up. That way we can start installing the shocks and go from there. All right, so the rear axle is all fully installed. I got everything all buttoned up, the brake lines, the ARB airline, everything's all torqued down and fully installed. All right, so with any build, there's always going to be issues that come up, and there's always an easy solution and a more complicated solution. So in this situation, I kind of landed in the middle. So the problem I'm having is the rear shocks are going to be limited on up travel. And the issue is where the factory body mounts are for the shocks, they're too close to the new lower shock mounts. So I came up with an idea to build my own upper shock mounts, kind of following a similar shock mount that you can buy off the shelf from JKS. But I decided I could build my own and save some money there and kind of follow the theme that I've been going with this Jeep, is building everything on a budget. All right, so this is what I ended up coming up with. I took a few days to really think through my design and come up with something that I like and that I'm satisfied with. So this is what I came up with. Sorry, there's no fabrication or welding footage for this, but I really needed to keep my mind clear and really get through this and come up with something that was going to be reliable. So what I ended up building is this upper shock mount piece here. It bolts to the factory locations, and it gives me this large section in the middle to put shock mounts and have them be the proper length, so I have exactly the right amount of up travel and down travel. I also have had these laying around. These are rear upper bar pin elimination brackets. So I tried to install these a while back, but I kind of ran into the same issue with the mount being too close to the rear axle. So they've just been hanging around. So I'm going to end up using these, and we're going to build brackets that weld to the pipe, and then these will weld to those brackets. Everything will have the right distances and lengths, so it all line up perfectly with the new shocks. All right, so I cut up some cardboard and I kind of designed how I want the brackets to be for the shocks. They're going to be a little bit different than this, but as you can see, it's going to be notched to fit around the tube, so we can line it up however it needs to be. I was kind of messing with it last night, and they should be pretty close to the side like this, but we're going to cut it all out of metal. The gussets will look a little bit different than they do here. I have some other ideas for that. So that's pretty much what's next up on the list, is to get this stuff all cut out and cleaned up and get ready to tack it to the mount here. I'll also show you what this looks like installed. It looks pretty good. It all fits nice. And yeah, so let's get into it. All right, so I got the new rear upper shock mount brackets all cut out and cleaned up, ready to be welded together. It's all turning out how I envisioned. I got these brackets all cleaned up as well, so once we get these all welded together, we'll be able to put them up under the Jeep and get them positioned correctly. All right, so I got the upper shock mount brackets fully welded together. I'm just waiting for them to cool down so I can get them tacked to the tube up top, and then we'll be able to finish weld the whole thing and the shocks will be ready to be installed. All right, so I got everything welded together. This is the final product. Turned out super nice. All this welding I've been doing has been some really great practice and really enjoying fabricating stuff. All right, so now that this is all finished up, I just need to get it all installed in the Jeep, get a shock mocked up before we paint this, just to make sure everything looks all right, make sure I don't want to change anything. All right, so I got the rear shocks all mocked up. It's looking really good. I'm really satisfied with how this all turned out. Everything has adequate clearance. The lower shock mounts might need to be clearanced a little bit when the axle flexes, but I won't know until I get it out and test it. But next up on the list is to get this upper shock mount painted and then get everything final installed and torqued down. All right, so it's another day after work, working on the Jeep. I finally got the rear shocks completely installed with the painted upper shock mount. Everything looks super awesome. I couldn't be more happy with how it all turned out. I definitely am ready to get out and get it all test it and see how it all works. I also installed all the rest of the parts that I removed during the process of all this. So let's get under the Jeep and I'll show you how it all turned out. All right, so here it is in all its glory. The rear shocks are finally installed. It's taken way longer than I anticipated it was going to, but I couldn't be more happy with how everything all turned out. Everything, as far as my measurements go, everything turned out exactly how I wanted. So I have exactly 4.5 shock shaft exposed, and I have 4.5 up travel to the bump stops. So everything should work perfectly. There shouldn't be any binding. The shocks are perfectly straight. Yeah, definitely super excited of how this all turned out. Now we just need to get out there and get it all tested and make sure that it really does perform how I want it to off-road. All right, so unfortunately, this is the end of the video of episode 2. Thank you so much for coming by and checking out what I have going on here. I couldn't be more happy with all the progress that I've made, and I hope that I can inspire people along the way. Don't forget to do all the YouTube things, comment, like, subscribe. Definitely will help me out a lot. But in the next episode, we'll be modifying the exhaust. We're going to be pretty much changing everything, adding some heat shielding. I'm really curious on how hot the floor is now and how hot it will be afterwards. It definitely radiates through the cabin, so that's what we'll be addressing. There might be some cooling system upgrades, a new radiator, some hood vents as well in the next video. But once again, thank you so much for watching and hanging out. Hope you have a great day, and we'll see you next time.